there is a lot to be learned. I have personally interviewed over 100 patients who had near-death experiences. I have watched hundreds, of near-death experience. I have read about maybe thousands more. And you see a pattern. When you study near-death experience, you see a very powerful pattern. One of the things that you see, which I think is undeniable, is that for individuals who have what I would say, valid near-death experiences, when you meet God, he's always described as loving. He radiates this stuff. He's a brilliant light. He emanates brilliant light, and you sense that he loves you, but not just you. He loves people. He loves humanity deeply. You get that when you're in his presence, okay? You also understand through the life review that when you behave in an unloving fashion, it bothers him. He likes it when we love each other. He gives you a thumbs up. You sense his approval. He's like applauding you. When you're watching your life review and you are doing sacrificial, loving behaviors for the people in your life, God is like clapping for you, and you sense how much he loves that kind of thing. Okay. So I say that because we're having people from all around the world, different cultures and religions, describing the same phenomena. God is always described like that. So the question, see, back in the old days, we didn't have AI. We didn't have ChatGPT or Grok. So if I got into an argument in college about Christianity, a common complaint that I heard was, you know what, all religions are just like Christianity. It just varies from culture to culture. I'm sure they have the exact same thing in other religions where they had miracles and God loves everybody and encourages this kind of morality. I'm sure they're all the same. And I couldn't argue because I hadn't studied all religions. I didn't know what I didn't think that was the case, but I couldn't prove it. Now we got ChatGPT. So when you get into those kind of goofy discussions, you can say, oh, really? That's what you think? Let's ask Grok. Let's go to ChatGPT, and see if your allegation is correct. Are all religions the same? Do they all present God the same way? So we know that when people have NDEs, they just see God as loving them, loving humanity, and supporting moral, loving behaviors toward your fellow man. That is, nobody's going to argue with that. Anybody that's looked at near-death experience, I don't care if you're how anti-Christian you are, you cannot watch near-death experiences and come away with any other conclusion. Okay? So, of all of the religions that have ever been, how many of them present God like this? How many of them present God as deeply loving humanity and encouraging you to love your fellow man? Okay, how many? Well, I asked Grok, how many of Earth's religions support that kind of God? Well, only 60 to 80 religions in all of history. 60 to 80. Now I'm considering anything that is an offshoot of Christianity is just Christianity because it's based on Yahweh. Okay? So 60 to 80 religions. That's it. Okay? Now of those 6, and that's like throughout all of history that we know about. Okay? Now of those, there are 8 major religions, and then historical or indigenous religions between 50 to 100 of those. So let's go through, and here's the question that I posed to Grok. Of those religions, how many of them present God as, or the chief deity? It doesn't have to be one God. I'm including the polytheistic religions, okay? So I'm going to be very inclusive. Of all of those religions, how many of them have a chief deity that loves man and encourages each individual to love their fellow man? So here are the historical religions. We have the ancient Egyptian religion, the Greek and Roman religion, the Norse religion. None of these meet criteria. They present God, okay, but they're seen as protectors, but love of man is not a central theme. The ethical teachers are focused on order and justice, not love. Okay, so same thing with the Greek and Roman religions. Gods were capricious. They loved certain heroes, not the common man. Okay, no universal love for humanity. They did encourage love, like Plato talked about agape, but religious practices did not emphasize this. So that was a Plato thing. That's not a religion. Okay. Norse religion, Odin is the dominant god. The gods were focused more on fate and battle. Okay? Benevolence was limited. Ethics centered on honor and kinship, not universal love. None of these meet criteria. The Mesopotamian religion, the dominant deity was Marduk and others. Gods were demanding or indifferent. They required appeasement. They did not love man. So disqualified. Canaanite religion, the dominant deity, El or Baal. The gods were more tied to natural cycles than human. We know a lot about the Canaanite religion now. I mean, we've interpreted their documents. We know the Canaanite religion very well. Baal, yeah, exactly. It's downright demonic. There was no clear ethical focus on love. Does not meet criteria. Mithraism, the dominant deity was Mithras. Mithras was a protector, but the focus was on initiates, not universal humanity. He did encourage brotherhood among initiates, but not love for anybody else. So if you're in our group, we love you. Anybody outside of that, not so much. Indigenous or animistic religions, such as Native American, African traditional religions. Now, these vary a lot because they're not all the same. You can't just say all indigenous. So that varies from tribe to tribe. And you have the dominant deity, it would vary, the great spirit or the creator gods. Some of these did depict the great spirit as benevolent and loving. So they, some of them weren't too far off the mark, actually. So they did encourage love, community, and harmony are often emphasized. So some do meet the criteria, but it's inconsistent. All right, now, major, obviously, Christianity and Judaism, all sects, yes, they meet criteria. We all know that. We're not going to spend any time on that because, yes, of course, Yahweh in the Bible loves man intently and encourages us to love our fellow man. Hands down, nobody's going to argue that. All right, what about Islam? Islam is kind of based on Yahweh. Okay, and so there is some evidence Allah's mercy aligns with love for humanity. So Allah is merciful. Okay, He doesn't come out and say that He loves us, but He's very merciful, and He does encourage interpersonal love, just less explicitly. So I'll give Him a pass. I'll give Him a pass on that. Okay, kind of. He was plagiarized. Yeah, indeed. Hinduism, no single deity dominates in Hinduism, but Vishnu, Shiva, or Brahman are often central. Brahman is not very interpersonal, not really loving. However, Krishna, Vishnu, a little bit better, okay? Vishnu is considered as benevolent, with avatars like Krishna showing care for humanity. Brahma is more of a cosmic principle. The concept of nonviolence and devotional love promotes compassion among humans. So it kind of a little bit meets criteria. So Hinduism, I'll give them a pass. Buddhism, no deity in the theistic sense. So, the Buddhist teaching emphasized compassion, but there's no God. So, I mean, it's not like if you go to heaven, Buddhism is there's no God that loves people there. So, I mean, it's kind of hard. It says it meets criteria in some traditions, but the problem is that, we have Buddhist teachings, but in terms of the dominant deity, there is no dominant deity here. There's no deity that loves humanity here. Sikhism, the dominant deity is Wahguru. The Sikh theology describes God as compassionate and benevolent, okay? Encourages love, yes. Selfless service, love for humanity. So yeah, Sikhism meets criteria. The Baha'i Faith. Baha'i Faith is very similar. Baha'i Faith is like the New Age version of Christianity without the Christian God. Okay, so emphasizes God's love for humanity with unity and love as central themes, promotes universal love and brotherhood. So, okay, we'll go along with that. Sure, sounds good. Jainism, there's no creator God, but there are these powerful enlightened beings that are venerated, and they model compassion. So they don't come out and say, I love you, but they model affection for humanity. So partially meets criteria because of the nonviolence is not quite the same as love, but okay. Compassion for all beings. All right. Zoroastrianism. Now, Zoroastrianism is a pretty old one. It's been around a long time. It's still around today. That was the dominant religion of the Persian Empire. Okay, before Islam, Zoroastrianism, their prophet Zoroaster lived between 1000 and 1500 BC. Okay, and a lot of similarities to the Christian God, surprisingly, of all of them. You look at Zoroastrianism and you're going, man, This is like a sister faith to the Judeo-Christian God. Now, the God in Zoroastrianism was called Ahura Mazda, and the devil was Angry Manu. All right, I think it's easy to remember because it sounds like angry man. But you had Satan and you had God, and God loved humanity. He was benevolent. He guided humanity towards truth and righteousness. So moral truth and righteousness, and encourage love. The Gathas promote good thoughts, good words, good deeds, kindness, and cooperation. So very much meets criteria. And then Shintoism, you have a pantheon, loves humanity. They're benevolent. They protect and nurture humanity, encouraging love, emphasizing harmony and respect. But interpersonal love, actually loving one another and you can respect, but in terms of going out of your way to do self-sacrificial loving behaviors, not so much. Okay. Taoism, lots of wisdom in Taoism, but the Tao is impersonal. You have deities like the Jade Emperor, but you get teachings that support compassion, but not explicitly love. You don't really have the Jade Emperor, who is like the principal spiritual being, does not love man. I mean, there's no description of him actually loving humanity. And then Confucianism, there's no deity. You have heaven is the guiding force, all right? And heaven is benevolent, but the focus is on moral order. But virtue is important. Being kind to one another is stressed. And so it does meet partial criteria. So that's it. Those are the major religions. So of those, of the major religions, 8 of them do meet criteria for presenting God as benevolent and loving and encouraging love for your fellow man. So when people have near-death experiences, these 8 world religions are on the right track. They're on the right track. All of them are. Okay. Now, question is, of those religions, in how many of them do we have a situation where evidence is provided that they are the true way? In how many of these faiths do the gods manifest themselves and reveal, hey, this is the way in history through the use of miracles? Because one of the things people would say when I would debate on college campuses is, well, I'm sure all religions have their miracles. It's just like Christianity. They all have their miracles. Well, now we can ask artificial intelligence, is that true? Do all these other religions, all those 8 major world religions, did the gods of those religions interfere in human history and do miracles, and people were witnesses, so that there was a description, a historical description of them doing miracles, so that we can get an idea as to when it happened, who were the witnesses, what was the evidence that it was a miracle? Did that really happen? Do these other religions do we have miracles being performed either by the gods or by their prophets? Okay, so how many of these religions do the followers report their deities or prophets performing miracles before contemporary human witnesses during recognizable human history? So I don't mean, oh, we had a miracle that was done in 11,000 BC. All right, that's not going to count because we don't have any records from that far back. Are there miracles being performed in recognizable history in the last 5,000 years or the last 4,000 years during some period where there could be records outside of Judaism and Christianity? Because I don't want to, obviously within Judaism and Christianity, there are miracles all over the place. But outside of that, are there any other beliefs where miracles are being performed in front of actual humans in human history? And the answer is yes. Yes. How many? Exactly 2. In all of look at all the religious literature out there. There are 2 incidences where miracles were performed and the people that saw the miracles wrote about it during the lifetimes of the actual events. So we're not talking about in Islam where 400 years later some Sufis decided to make up stories about Muhammad doing miracles. Muhammad was very clear. I don't have any miracles except for the Quran. That's my miracle. You don't get anything else. So later on they say, oh, because they got blowback from Christians they were trying to convert. And so they would say, well, Jesus did miracles. What did Muhammad do? and they didn't have anything. So they made up stories about Muhammad doing miracles 400 years after the fact. All right, that doesn't count. I'm talking about, are there stories of people doing miracles at the time of the so-called prophet? And it was recorded at the time. So there are two examples. Both of them are in Islam, by the way. Okay. So, and both in the Sufi. The Sufi sect of Islam is kind of like the charismatics in Christianity. Okay. So they were into that supernatural stuff. All right. So two examples. Huh?
Are they the whirling dervishes?
I don't know. Maybe they are. They might be. I don't know. So there are two examples. One was a Sufi mystic named Ahmad al-Alawi. Okay. Ahmad al-Alawi had his own little sect in Algeria. And one of his documenter here, Fatima El Yashrutiya, I can't pronounce her name. All right. But she reports that in Algeria between 1910 and 1930, in Mostaganem, Algeria, there was one of his followers, one of his chief guys, died reportedly, and Ahmed whispered in his ear, and he came back to life. Okay, so that's the biggest miracle of all, biggest one of all. All right, so it's recorded in a book called The Two Who Attained, and it promoted al-Alawi's spiritual authority within that particular sect. However, there's just one report and only one witness. Fatima was the only witness. There are no other witnesses documented. We don't know exactly when it happened. All we have is the city in which it occurred, and we guesstimate it was between 1910 and 1930. That's all we have. That's it. That's the best one, by the way. Okay. So there's another one, though. All right. Max Leon, the father of Bawa Mahadin Fellowship and the head of the Board of Trustees, he was seriously ill and near death. So Max was almost dead. He was really, really, really sick. And this was in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Max Leon's family was there, and the fellowship was there. And Bawa Mahadin prayed for him. He interceded on Leon's behalf, and Leon got better. Oh, very cool, right? That's the miracle. He got better. He wasn't dead, but he was really sick, and he prayed for him, and he got better. Using that criteria, I'm a prophet too. Okay. Now, the other thing, though, that really made Bawa Mahadin, what made him really powerful, is he had clairvoyant abilities. If somebody came up to him and he didn't know him, he could tell you about your life. He could tell you what your problems were and tell you things like your future and your past. And so he had clairvoyant abilities. All right. So he would tell you your spiritual and personal challenges. He would give you spiritual guidance, give you, he would have his supernatural knowledge of your personal life and your thoughts. So does that sound like a prophet? Could be, but it also sounds like somebody who's into the occult, because that stuff does work. And people who are into the occult, I mean, as we know from a Christian perspective, you're screwing around with demons, and they do give you powers. So yeah, but those are it though. I mean, that's the interesting thing. If you go to ChatGPT or Grok and you ask them these questions, those are the two that you come up with. Outside of Christianity, the gods provide no corroborating evidence, okay, in history. I mean, you'll hear stories of miraculous deeds of the gods that happened in prehistoric times, but nothing happens in the lifetimes of actual humans that it can be documented and so forth. This is the best they've got. Outside of Christianity, this is it. This is it. So the claim that all religions are the same, they've all got their prophets, they've all got their miracles, they all raise people from the dead, blah, 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 that's bull. Jesus was unique across the board. Across the board. And the God of the Bible is very consistent with what people experience in their near-death experience, including children. Think about all the children who have not been indoctrinated with religion who are having near-death experiences. And when they see God, when they see the Lord, how do they describe him? As benevolent, loving, and promoting loving, positive behaviors. Okay? So I think that's very interesting. So now let's jump into, and as we go through this, you're going to see why I brought some of this stuff up. So there is a tie into today's passages that we're going to look at. So we're going to jump right into chapter 3, starting with the wise men visit. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of King Herod, wise men from the east arrived in Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star at its rising and have come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was deeply disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. So he assembled the chief priests and scribes of the people and asked them where the Messiah would be born. "In Bethlehem of Judea," they told him, "because this is what was written by the prophet. And you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, because out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly summoned the wise men and asked them to the exact time the star appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. When you find him, report back to me so that I too can go and worship him." After hearing the king, they went on their way. And there it was, the star they had seen at its rising. It led them until it came and stopped above the place where the child was. Now, when I was in college and earlier, I used to think that that star was probably a meteor or a real star or something like that. And I'm going, no, that doesn't make any sense. Stars don't stop over somebody's house. Okay. Meteors don't like stop above your house unless there's something really supernatural involved. So my conclusion here is this was some kind of supernatural light. I can't think of anything in nature that would explain. I mean, stars are, how many stars are over your house? I mean, come on. Stars are too far away to be over a house, okay?
Maybe they didn't have another way to describe it. And they just said
exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I agree with you. That was the best term they had. It was a shiny light, so they called it a star. So yeah, I agree with you. I absolutely agree. So it's not that there's a contradiction. That was the best way to describe it. So it's not wrong. I mean, you have to use language. And in our language, we use the words that best fit. There's no word for a supernatural illuminating body back then. Okay, so they call it a star. All right. When they saw the star, they were overwhelmed with joy. Entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and falling to their knees, they worshiped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. How many wise men were there? Exactly. It doesn't say. Why do they always say 3 in the nativity programs? Why is it always 3? Exactly, because of the 3 gifts. But no, just because you give 3 gifts doesn't mean there are 3 wise men. And later in about the 6th, I think it was around the 6th century, they came up with legends and they named them. And that's why in the cartoons and stuff, they all have names. But that came hundreds of years later. So we don't know what their names were. All we know is that they were called, the word for wise men is magi. Now in the Bible, in the New Testament, it's written, the New Testament was written in Greek, okay, I believe, except maybe, was it Matthew, was written in Aramaic and then later translated into Greek. But it's written in Greek. And there are other words. There are Italian words. There are Roman words in the Bible, okay, lots of Greek words. And there is one Persian word in the New Testament, one. And what is that word? Magi. It refers to a specific group of priests from Persia, okay? From the Parthian Empire. That's Persia, okay? So here we have the Roman Empire, and here we have the Parthian Empire. Now, did the Romans rule over the Parthians? No. They had an uneasy peace, like North and South Korea. Now, under Alexander the Great, he ruled all of this. But when the Romans defeated the Greeks, the Romans were unable to defeat the Parthians. And so we have an uneasy line right here. Here's Israel right there, and there's the border between the Parthian world and the Roman world. Okay? So it's kind of like, but they traded with one another. So it was a lot like the United States and China. Okay? So yeah, we trade with you, we make lots of money off each other, but we skirmish every now and then. We don't get along over a lot of important issues. That's how it was. So these magi were very powerful because they were religious figures, but they were also like the governors and mayors of cities. So they were rulers as well. So when they came into Israel, when they visited Herod, he treated them like foreign dignitaries because they were. We don't want war with the Parthian Empire. We don't want to start no mess with the Parthian Empire. So they were respected. That's why he treated them so well. Okay? And Herod, he was a schmoozer. Remember, Herod, that's how we got that position. We talked about that a few times ago. Herod was a big-time schmoozer. He knew how to kiss up to diplomats. So he could tell you what you wanted to hear. That's why he rose to power and was as powerful as he was, because he schmoozed up to powerful people. All right? So he gives them that line. But yeah, these guys, they were basically priests of the Zoroastrian religion. Okay? All right, so that's what I just said. The word magi originates from the Old Persian magus, and it denotes a priestly caste in ancient Persia associated with Zoroastrianism. And their sacred text are like the Avesta, and they describe the magi in ritual sections. The magi are said to have come from the east, likely referring to the Parthian Empire centered in modern-day Iran, where Zoroastrianism was the dominant religion during the time of Jesus' birth. The Parthian priestly class included magi who served as advisors, astrologers, and religious officials. And basically, scholars argue that their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh reflect Zoroastrian influences, such as prophecies of a divine savior. Now, the divine savior that they were looking for was called the Saoshyant. That's their version of the Messiah. So in their scriptures, it predicted that the Saoshyant was going to come, and he was going to save the people. All right, he was going to be the savior of the whole world. And so in their eschatology, in their religious, their prophets predicted that the Saoshyant would be coming, and that's where they got the idea to follow the stars. Because in the Zoroastrian scriptures, there was a prophecy that the star would guide them to the Saoshyant. Now, according to Zoroastrian end times belief, what is the significance of the Saoshyant? The Saoshyant would lead the final battle against Angra Mainyu, that's Satan. He would lead the final battle, and his forces would break all demonic power. Number 2, the Saoshyant would resurrect the dead and restore bodies to eternal perfection. So those that have died would be resurrected and given new bodies that would last eternally. The Saoshyant would clean souls, including the souls of the damned, through rituals. Okay? He would perform a final sacrifice to create the elixir of immortality. Everybody would live forever because of his final sacrifice. And he would restore paradise. The world will become imperishable, ageless, and ever living. In other words, the second law of thermodynamics would be defeated. Things would no longer run down, get old, or die. The world would be everlasting and eternal and never fall apart again. That would happen during the reign of the Saoshyant. That's who they were looking for.
Do you think that they originally knew the truth, and over time that their faith was corrupted into that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, back after the flood.
Oh, yeah.
Most
yeah.
people were believed in the one true God. And
Yeah.
over time.
And then, well, it's not over time. It happened very quickly. It wasn't over time. After the Tower of Babel, as we talked about earlier, after the Tower of Babel, God divided up the nations according to the number of the sons of God. So basically, the angels got to be the only country that had God over it was Israel. All the other countries were divided up and given to angels, basically. And unfortunately, not all, but many of those angels rebelled and directed worship to themselves. Okay? And that's why we have some of these, like the Mesopotamian religions, that went completely off script and chose darkness. Others did not go that far away. And I believe that Zoroastrianism was under basically the Persia at that time, may have been under the influence of a more benevolent entity called Ahura Mazda. Yeah. But there was also another one. There was also another prince of Persia Okay, because remember, there's not just one, there wasn't necessarily a one-to-one. It was a group of angels over there. So there were good ones and bad ones. So there was another prince of Persia that we know was evil. Okay, so you get the idea.
Okay.
All right, entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. And falling to their knees, they worshipped him, and they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, which is probably why Joseph would just pick up in the middle of the night and move to Egypt, because he had the money to do it. All right, he could buy airplane tickets and everything, so he was good. And being warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their own country by another route. After they were gone, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, "Get up. Take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there till I tell you." See, he flew to Egypt. Told you, bought an airplane ticket. For Herod is about to search for the child to kill him. So he got up, took the child and his mother during the night, and escaped to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod's death, so that what was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled. Out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he realized that he had been outwitted by the wise men, flew into a rage. He gave orders to massacre all the boys in and around Bethlehem who were 2 years old and under, in keeping with the time he had learned from the wise men. Then what was spoken through Jeremiah the prophet was fulfilled. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, and she refused to be consoled because there were no more. And I mentioned before that critics have come against that verse and said, well, you know what? There's no record of that in Josephus. No other historian of the time mentioned this massacre of the innocents. And this is so easy to blow away. Come on. It's like, this was not a world-shaking event. Bethlehem was not that big. How many kids are we talking here? All right. It's only the boys 2 years and under. How many were there? What, 50 would be a big number. So we're talking probably less than 30 kids. Do you think that's going to make world news? These emperors were slaughtering people by the thousands. Do you really think that Josephus, these kind of things took place all the time. 30 people, if there are 30 kids, it's going to make world history. No. Now, if the people at Bethlehem had risen up and did a revolt against Herod over this, then that would have made the news. But they didn't. They took it. They just had more babies. After Herod died, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, because those who intended to kill the child are dead." So he got up, took the child and his mother, and entered the land of Israel. Now remember, he was from the Jerusalem area. So he's going back home. He has the option to go to Bethlehem, to go back to the Jerusalem area where the work was, or somewhere else. And so he was intended to go back to the Judea, to the Jerusalem area. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. And being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the region of Galilee. Then he went and settled in a town called Nazareth to fulfill what was spoken by the prophets, that he would be called a Nazarene. Now, who was Archelaus? Now, for a time, before we didn't have history on Archelaus, and so anytime a historical figure is mentioned in the Bible, the critics would say, that never happened, that ruler never existed, blah, blah, blah. Archelaus is difficult to argue about because we have historical records. Archelaus is discussed at length. Josephus, thank you. Yeah, in the book on wars and another documentation, he describes Archelaus. Archelaus was a pretty bad guy. He did not have the charisma of his father. Archelaus was like Herod's favorite son, okay? But he wasn't a people person at all. And he was kind of ruthless. Now, under Herod the Great, there was an uprising. There was 2 teachers and a bunch of the teachers' students, about 30 of the students. And when they finished building the great temple, the Romans put a Roman eagle at the entrance. And so that's a pagan symbol. And so these 2 teachers and his 30 students, they took that eagle down. And, Herod was like, okay, whatever. Well, when Archelaus took power, he rounded up those guys and killed them. But he didn't. And then when he killed those students, there was an uprising. And Archelaus put that uprising down by killing 3,000 people. So Archelaus had a bad reputation. That's why Joseph didn't want to go there, because it wasn't safe. The tensions between the Romans and the Jews there were very high because of Archelaus. The boy grew up and became strong, filled with wisdom, and God's grace was on him. Every year his parents traveled to Jerusalem for the Passover festival. When he was 12 years old, they went up according to the custom of the festival. After those days were over, as they were returning, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but his parents did not know it. Assuming he was traveling in the traveling party, they went on a day's journey. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they returned to Jerusalem to search for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. And all those who heard him were astounded at his understanding and his answers. When his parents saw him, they were astonished. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this?" Now, I understand Mary's response. Losing a kid is terrifying. Anybody ever lost a kid before? I have, one time. And I had nightmares about this for years. My youngest daughter, Katie, was 3 or 4 years old. And the whole family, we went to Cedar Point. So the whole extended family is at Cedar Point, right? You know how busy Cedar Point is. It's like this gigantic amusement park like Disneyland. And I lost track of Katie. And I'm looking around and nobody knows where Katie is. And for those were the scariest 10 minutes of my life. She was with family members, but I didn't know that. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, this is clearly the worst thing that ever happened to me in my life. I would rather die than lose a kid. Okay, that's like, oh my gosh. So it turned out okay, but that puts you through the most stress you will ever go through in your life. There is no worse stress than losing a child. It does not. That's it. There's nothing that compares. There isn't. I mean, look. I've been burned alive before. Okay, I still have third-degree burns over a large portion of my body. That was nothing compared to losing a child. Okay, all right. It's the scariest, most horrible thing. So I get Mary, thinking, oh my gosh, we lost our kid. Not only that, we lost God's kid. It's like God gave me this Messiah, and I lost him. It's like, boy, am I in trouble, right? So she says, man, you know what you put us through? Do you know what you put us through? That's what she said. Do you have any idea what you put us through? Jesus is like, did you not know that it was necessary for me to be in my Father's house? It's like, duh. It's like, what do you mean you missed me? Did you know? I'm home, man. I'm home. Just check my house, man. I'm home. Then he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was obedient to them. His mother kept all these things in her heart. This is the second time we've seen that phrase. She did that when the shepherd showed up. She kept that in her heart. And this situation, she kept this. What does this tell us? What this tells us is the author is telling you where all of this came from. It came from Mary. His mother kept these things in her heart. What does that mean? She put them in her left ventricle? No. She memorized this stuff. This was so important. She committed it to memory. So this is telling you that this material before Jesus was born and during his birth, all that stuff, this came from Mary. Mary was hanging out after Jesus rose from the dead. Mary was hanging out with John, with the other gospel writers. She was the source of these stories. Okay, I'm very confident of that. That's what that means. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with people. People liked him. Okay. In the 15th year, now we're going to fast forward. Boom, boom, boom. So now we're done. Jesus is no longer 12 years old. Fast forward. How fast forward are we going? Because now we're getting into Jesus' ministry where he's doing miracles left and right. And so the gospel authors, they're telling you a story that's going to be hard to believe. And they know that this is going to be incredible. It's going to be really hard to believe because this kind of stuff never happened before. So the author here, and this I believe is Luke, is going to tell you, yeah, this is crazy stuff, but I'm going to tell you exactly when and where all this stuff happened. I'm going to give you dates and places. So I challenge you, because he's writing to people who are still alive. The witnesses are still alive, saying, look, I challenge you, man, okay? Go back and check my work.
Mary was still alive.
When this was written, most likely she was. Yeah, because Luke, it is likely that Mary was still alive. Okay, we don't know for sure, but I think it's highly likely because this wasn't that far from the events. Okay, so what do we got? In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. So we're no longer under Augustus. Now we're under the guy after Augustus, Tiberius Caesar. In the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, while Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, Herod Antipas was tetrarch of Galilee, his brother Philip, tetrarch of the region of Iturea and Trachonitis, and Lysanus, tetrarch of Abilene. During the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, God's word came to John, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. I mean, talk about specific. So he's not telling you in the year 28 AD, because they didn't have that calendar back then. And he doesn't give you the Jewish calendar. So he's telling you, you want to know across the entire Roman world, if you want to know when this stuff happened, this is when it happened. So if you have any Jewish friends that were alive at that time, go ask them about this stuff. They will corroborate the story. If you're going to lie about something, don't give specifics. Nothing said that Luke had to give these specifics. He could have just jumped over here and there was a guy named John the Baptist and not given dates. This guy gives dates. He tells you exactly when in history this took place. Okay? So, what year was it? Well, the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar. We know from history that Tiberius Caesar started in 14 AD. September 14 AD, he was inaugurated. So we know that. What's 15 years from September 14 AD? Well, that would be a 15-year span, would be September, it's the time between September 14, 28 AD and September 13, 29 AD. So that tells you when John the Baptist started doing his thing. Okay? That's very specific. All right. Now, when it describes these Roman rulers, Pontius Pilate, governor of Judea, we've got tons of stuff on Pontius Pilate outside the Bible. Nobody's going to argue the historicity of Pontius Pilate. Nobody. Herod Antipas was tetrarch of Galilee. Josephus talked about Herod Antipas. We know a lot about him. That's the guy that married his brother's wife. Okay. His brother Philip. So Herod Antipas was married to Philip's wife. But Philip was also a tetrarch. And not only is Philip mentioned in the works of Josephus, we found coins that bear Philip's image and his name. Okay, so we not only have written historical documentation that Philip was indeed tetrarch, we found coins in his honor. Okay, Licinius, tetrarch of Abilene. We've got documents talking about Philip being tetrarch of Abilene, plus it's also mentioned in Josephus. So there is background. If it weren't for Josephus and archaeology, I guarantee you, critics of the Bible would say this was all made up. This is all made up. Hundreds of years later, it was made up. Can't say that. And what this does, think about it right now. If I held a gun to your head and I'd say, okay, I want you to provide a history for the events that took place in 1859, could you do it? Could you sit down? What is the chances that you could sit down right now and write out fiction about the events and get the names right? It's ridiculous. No, they didn't have the internet back then. It's not like they could look up and say who was ruling during. That tells you the author is writing. This stuff's still fresh in his mind. Okay, the author is writing at a time when the events are very recent. There's no way this could be a legend from hundreds of years later. It's just not possible. And also he said something that used to a lot of the critics were really bothered because he said it was during the reign of when Annas and Caiaphas were the chief priests. And a lot of people go, oh, that shows you're ignorant of Judaism because the Romans and the Jews only allowed one high priest at a time. That's a mistake. Aha! Luke is wrong because he lists two people as being high priests. Annas and Caiaphas? No. During this time period, we know that Caiaphas was the high priest. Annas was the priest that came before him. Well, guess what? Josephus makes the same mistake. Josephus also comments about the reign of Annas and Caiaphas. And the reason for that is that, you know how we call President Clinton, we still call him President Clinton? Is he president? No. It's an honorary title. Okay, there you go. Plus, Annas was Caiaphas' father-in-law. So Annas still had some authority. He wasn't officially the high priest, but he was respected as such. Remember, when Jesus was first arrested, where did he go first? To the home of Annas, even though he wasn't actually high priest. Okay? His son-in-law was the actual high priest. So yeah, so Luke was right. Luke was writing at a time when everybody recognized that we kind of have two high priests. Okay? So I think I'm going to stop there, just because this is a little bit long, and I don't want to. There's a lot of information here, so we'll go more into this next time. Any questions?